We're back now in conversation. Matters Tanzania. The elections are coming up. We want to know exactly what the political landscape looks like. We want to know what the possibilities are as far as a new president or the incumbent retaining power, what that means for the people of Tanzania, what that means for Kenyans and for the East African community as a whole. Wanjiru Muitha is with us in studio. She's a country campaigner for Amnesty International East Africa, and we'll be speaking to her about all of this and more. Karibu sana, Wanjiru.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you.
We also have online Baruani Mshale, who is from Tanzania. He's a public intellectual with interest in equitable and sustainable development. He's joining us via video link. From maybe he'll be able to tell us exactly where he is, but he's been following up, these issues of the election and the campaigns in Tanzania. Baruani as well, thank you very much for joining us, and good morning from wherever you are.
Thank you very much, Eric. Good morning, and I'm glad to be here.
Asante.
I am somewhere in Europe.
Oh, you're somewhere in Europe. We usually begin our conversations with a quote. It's a day's quote. Our colleague Janet Bogo, who's not in the studio today, has left it with Mariam. So Mariam is going to give us a quote. Let's hear from you, Wanjiru. What's your interpretation of it? And from you, Baruani, as well. What's your interpretation of this particular quote?
All right. Let me share the quote with you. It was a quote given by Wangari Maathai while she was lecturing at the Yale University in 2004. Yes, she was giving a lecture and she said, "You can't heal what you refuse to confront. You can't heal what you refuse to confront." She was reflecting at the time on Kenya's environmental and political wounds, urging nations to face uncomfortable truths to build genuine progress. What does this say to you?
I think I can answer that in the context of Tanzania. You can't heal what you don't confront. In the context of Tanzania, I think same thing as Wangari Maathai has said, referred to the political wounds that Samia Suluhu took up when she became president. Prior to her being president, there was Magufuli. Rights were not being respected in that context. And when she came in, while she did do some reforms, make some progress, but I think the systematic issues, these are the vague laws, the repressive laws, she did not address them fully. So the wounds are still festering, they're growing bigger. So until she confronts these wounds, these systematic issues, then Tanzania will not heal.
I like that take.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good interpretation. Let's talk to the Tanzanian. Baruani, what's your interpretation of this quote?
That's a very good quote. You can't heal what you refuse to confront. President Samia, when she assumed the position of presidency, she came with her philosophy of the 4R: reconciliation, resilience, reform, and rebuild. And that is very timely, that is very important. At least she started with that agenda, that we have to embark on a journey towards reconciliation. And when she was launching her presidential campaign in the ongoing elections, she has promised that within 100 days after the election, she will lead the process of reconciliation. I have spoken before at a national convening where the president officiated that convening on democracy in Tanzania, and I talked about these 4R. And what I say there that resonates with what Wangari Maathai says here is that I said we should avoid a partial healing or a superficial healing process. That in Kiswahili we have a saying, we say, funika kombe mwanaharamu apite, which is just avoiding to confront the ugly truth that is high, that we are embarking on a journey and then we don't actually address the underlying causes. And in Tanzania, these wounds did not just start with President Magufuli, they started from when we got independence. So if we want true healing, proper healing, we have to go back all the way to the 1961 when we got independence and look at all the stories, all the narratives that we have been telling ourselves and whether they have been helping in creating a unified nation, or we have been rather hiding the divisions that are there in our society. So we really, really need to confront what is causing these wounds.
But Baruani, what are these? If I look at the R's, reconciliation, resilience, reform, and rebuild. Reconciliation from what? I mean, what was it that would make the entirety of Tanzanian society want to reconcile?
It is very clear, and the fact that even the president came with that agenda, that philosophy, it's a realization that we need to reconcile. It is there. Everybody knows that the people have been hurt. People have disappeared. People's rights have been violated. There has been squeeze on whoever dares to speak the truth, whoever says something different from what is expected. If you look at the media, if you look at the civil society, if you look at the academia, the opposition political parties, artists, all of them have been squeezed in one way or the other. And all of these are the wounds that people are talking about. These are the differences that do exist, not just the political. Issues of violence against women and children have been on the rise. They are constantly and increasingly being reported on the media. These are some of the issues that we need to reconcile. What is driving all of these? There are people who are benefiting from the economic system that we have in the country, while there are so many people whose cost of living keeps skyrocketing. These are the other wounds that we need to deal with. The economic wounds, people's livelihoods have been affected. The economy is growing, yes, but there are so many Tanzanians who are not benefiting from the growing economy. And we need to address that. We need to talk about it. That is that part of the broader reconciliation process. If we all want to enjoy being Tanzanian and we all want to share that national identity of being a Tanzanian, then everybody have to feel at home, not just politically, but socially, economically, culturally, and otherwise.
Thank you, Baruani. We'll come back to you in a minute, but I want to get a picture of the political landscape in Tanzania right now. Who are the big players as we come into this election? What is the strength of the opposition, quote unquote? Because as I'm listening to what Baruani is saying, if you had told me he's talking about Kenya, I would have been like, yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because it seems Africa is a country. The same things that plague us, plague all of us. But Wanjiru, please paint a picture for us.
When you ask who are the big players, I think the question should be who is the only player at this point in time? Because, I mean, what we're seeing is a very coordinated strategy by the government to suppress the opposition and to silence dissenting voices. President Samia will run as for the presidency as the holder of the Chama Cha Mapinduzi party, which is the ruling party, has been the ruling party since independence. The two other parties, the substantial ones, which is Chadema and Activism, they have no candidates on the ballot paper this time around. Why? Because the government is using all means possible to ensure that the two parties do not appear anywhere across the board. A good example, the arrest of the Chadema chairperson, Tundu Lissu. He's now been in arbitrary detention, I believe it's 205 days. He cannot run for presidency. He's being charged with the unbailable offense of treason. That by virtue of that alone, he cannot run for presidency. For Activism, the presidential candidate Luhaga Mpina, he is actually a defector from Chama Cha Mapinduzi. He went to Activism and he was disqualified by the independent National Electoral Commission. They cited internal party procedure violations, and because of that, he will not be on the ballot box. At another level, you find that Chadema has been fully disqualified from the elections. They're not going to be anywhere on that ballot box. So the government is clearly using all means possible to not only undermine electoral challenge, but also just to fully shut down all the major political opposition. Yes, there are 17 candidates who have been cleared to run by INEC. However, the other 16 come from little-known parties. There are speculations that these other 16 come from parties that have government affiliations. So that creates a playing field that is not level. I mean, what do you guys think? There is no fighting chance for any opposition in Tanzania right now. Yeah.
So it's like she is the only notable candidate. If the Act Wazalendo candidate was then disqualified, was the process for disqualification properly followed? Like, did the Electoral Commission use proper procedure, cited law, cited cases, and said that for this reason, we are therefore disqualifying you?
So what the INEC used, it cited the regulation that you must be a member of a party for 30 days before your name is fronted for such a position. Act Wazalendo says that these rules were updated, that is not the truth on the ground, that they're just using this regulation to push their narrative.
Okay, but what does the law actually say?
This is the party laws.
Okay.
So for Act Wazalendo, they are saying that they have updated their party laws.
Those laws.
Yes. Yeah. So the government has picked this regulation and is running with it no matter what. And also with the disqualification of the Act Wazalendo calendar, there are a number of court rulings saying that he shouldn't be disqualified. So the INEC is working despite those court rulings, which also shows a high disregard for the court system and the rulings that come from this system.
As you look at that, Baruani, and I mean, you are Tanzania, and you've been following this election, you've been following the internal politics then. Was this a move by Act Wazalendo to have a candidate and to have a strong candidate, so they also worked backwards, or they worked ahead of time to amend these laws to allow their preferred candidate to be on the ballot?
I don't know I don't have inside information about what might have transpired within the ACT Wazalendo or Act Wazalendo, as you pronounce it. But I mean, we can split hairs in trying to understand whether they followed the law or their own internal procedures, etc. But you know exactly that if there was a viable candidate from the opposition, reasons would be found, or even no reasons would be found, to prevent that candidate from contesting. So yes, we can go into details and try to understand what happened, whether they violated their own internal party procedures or not. But it is clear that any strong candidate would have had it very difficult, very tough for them to participate in this election.
Aside from the presidential ticket, does the ACT Wazalendo, we say ACT in Kenya, in TZ, ACT Wazalendo, does ACT Wazalendo and Chadema, do they have strong candidates for parliamentary seats?
So Chadema decided not to participate at any level, from the ward councillors, members of parliament, and the presidential election. So they don't have any candidates anywhere. And some of their members who fled from the party and joined another party, Chauma, some of them are contesting in a number of constituencies. I don't remember exactly how many. ACT Wazalendo has some candidates in a number of constituencies. Again, I do not recall how many, but some of them are strong candidates, including their former party leader, Zito Zuberi Kabwe, who is contesting for the MP seat from his constituency, Kigoma Ujiji, in the western part of the country. And there are a few others who are also strong, including their party secretary general, who is contesting in a constituency somewhere in the south. So they do have some strong candidates. Are they going to win? We don't know. Because in 2020, even the strong candidates from the opposition, including Chadema, when Chadema participated in the election, did not win. And the CCM ended up with 99-point-something% of the MP seats. So, yes, they may have very good candidates now, but whether they're going to win and be announced, we don't know.
Chadema refused to sign the Electoral Code of Conduct. Yeah? What was the reason behind this? Did they essentially lock themselves out of the elections? Was it in protest? What was so, what would I call it, controversial in this electoral code of conduct? Let me start with Wanjiru.
I think Chadema, straight from the beginning of this campaign period, even before that, they were calling for reforms, and they did say that no, their main banner is no reforms, no elections. That's what they're calling for. They believe that with reforms, it will level the playing field. Tanzanians will enjoy their human rights, and even going into the polls, it will be fair for all parties involved. So without these reforms, I believe that the signing or the lack of signing of the code of conduct was in protest to ensure that things are aligned. Yeah.
Okay, is that your reading of it as well, Baruani?
Yes, and I'm just going to contextualize it a little bit to expand the time scale here. This all came as a result of the failed constitution-making process from 2014. When that process was stopped, Chadema and other opposition political parties agreed on minimum reforms with CCM. But when President Magufuli came into power, he stopped that process, not continuing with the new constitution-making process, not even implementing what was agreed as the minimum reforms. And the aim of the minimum reforms were really to have a more free, independent and credible elections, including having an independent electoral commission, amending the Political Parties Act to decriminalize some of the otherwise normal political actions that are usually undertaken by political parties in any country, and a number of other reforms. If we couldn't have a new constitution, then at least let's have these minimum reforms that would ensure we have credible, free and fair elections. And then once we have more legitimate members of parliament, then they can lead the country into a constitution-making process. But President Magufuli disregarded all of that. And when President Samia assumed the power, the country revived that process, including talking about the minimum reforms and the formation of a task force for building democracy. But that initial excitement about opening up the country, widening civic and human rights, etc., was very short-lived because immediately thereafter we saw now the government submitting bills to amend a number of laws to the parliament, including the National Electoral Commission Act, by just changing the name, and now it's called Independent National Electoral Commission. There were amendments to some other laws, electoral-related laws as well, including the electoral financing laws. The Political Parties Act was further amended as well. So all of these amendments did not guarantee that we are actually making our elections more independent, more credible. One can look at the provisions in there and one will clearly see that they're actually worse than how they were before. So Chadema initially was pushing for reviving the constitution-making process, but when they realized we were getting closer to the elections and we won't be able to have a new constitution, then they started pushing for the reforms. And it's only late last year and early this year that they came up with a slogan of no reforms, no elections, in that we can't have a new constitution, and therefore let's at least reform some of the laws to ensure that we have credible elections. So they decided not to participate because these reforms had not happened. So that electoral code of conduct is based on already problematic laws. And that is why for them they said they are not going to sign that because it's coming from problematic laws. And it doesn't make sense to go ahead with that.
All right. Baruani, Mshale, stay on the line. We'll be coming back to you shortly after we take this quick break. We're also in the studio with Wanjiru Muitha from Amnesty International. We're talking about Tanzania's general elections happening on Wednesday. Back in a moment. It's 9 a.m.
Good point. We're back in conversation with Wanjiru Muitha, who is from Amnesty International. She's a country campaigner. And we also have Baruani Mshale, who is, of course, a political, I don't want to call him a political analyst falsely.
He's a rights and democracy activist.
A rights and democracy activist.
And an intellectual from Tanzania.
That's the correct one, from Tanzania. Baruani, welcome
Joining
back.
us from somewhere in Europe.
It's good to have you both back. We were discussing, of course, the minimum reforms that were proposed by Chadema coming in, or that they were hoping to achieve coming into this year, and then Chadema deciding to boycott these elections because, again, if these things haven't been done, and of course, if you are giving us an electoral policy or something to sign that is based on laws that are, I would call them punitive, or not just, then of course you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But what does that mean for democracy? One of our fixers earlier in the morning said there's 4 candidates in Tanzania's election: Mama, Samia, Suluhu, na Hassan. So does sitting out this election serve Chadema and the Tanzanian people? Let me start with Wanjiru, then we'll go to Baruani.
I think sitting out these elections is an act of resistance itself. We wouldn't expect Chadema to just lay low and say, okay, if you're not giving us these reforms, then we will take part in what they regard a sham of an election. So by sitting out, it's an act of resistance itself by saying, no, enough is enough. We will not take part in this circus that you are letting us be part, that you want us to be part of. By also sitting out, I believe in some way it puts pressure on the government of Tanzania to ensure that it might not be tomorrow, it might not be in a week's time, but these minimum reforms and the bigger reforms are worked towards. It may be after elections, but resistance comes in many ways. One person may say that by sitting out these elections that they're actually pulling out their voice, but resistance is different, means different things to different people, and this is working well for Chadema.
It's working well for Chadema. What about for Tanzanians?
I cannot speak on behalf of all Tanzanians, but I mean, I have seen, just doing some social listening online as Juniper, I am actually seeing an increase in the use of this hashtag, no reforms, no elections. So it means qua ground, things are actually moving. I'm not a political analyst myself. I look at the human rights angle of things, but qua ground, when you go on X, you do see that there is a bit of, there's a big increase in traffic around this hashtag.
What about you, Baruani? What does this mean for Tanzanians, not just for Chadema, and also for Chadema and its future?
So for Chadema, I would say it's a political gamble. It may work well or it may backfire. It can work well in that, yes, it's an act of resistance, it's a protest, in that they don't want to take part in the process of legitimizing otherwise questionable electoral processes.
Right.
And by staying away, and then if you have an opportunity, that is, if Chadema has an opportunity of connecting with the people and explaining themselves, then that will help them get the political support that any political party would need. But then the landscape, the context doesn't allow them to go around and connect with the people and bash at this election and show why it was important for them to disengage, to boycott. Why I'm saying that? Because you can clearly see that by not participating, they won't have the subsidy money that they would otherwise have received if they participated, depending on the number of votes that they would receive. And the changing funding landscape globally would imply they won't have sufficient financial resources for them to go around, should political circumstances allow them to even go around. But then there are so many restrictions, even by the state organs, for them to go around and talk to the people and explain their case. So it's a gamble in that if the civic space allows, then it will work for them. Otherwise, it becomes difficult. To Wanjiru's point about what you are seeing on social media platforms through social listening, We have tried to do some kind of analysis and looking at some of the data that others have collected, and we realize that perhaps social media is such a bubble, and that if one looks at some of the polls that have been conducted recently, one would realize the views that Tanzanians who rely on social media as their main source of information have different views from the views that Tanzanians who rely on TV and radio have. So social media becomes a bubble in that just to take an example, some of the findings reveal that there are so many Tanzanians who do not know why Chadema is not participating in these elections, and they keep wondering why they did not put a candidate to a particular constituency, and they're thinking that maybe Chadema just decided that, but they don't understand why Chadema decided to boycott. So for them, they feel like the opposition is losing relevance without understanding the squeezing political context in the country.
Then that brings in the question, Baruani, on the media. Are you saying that we actually don't have media in Tanzania that would give this other depth and perspectives around this election?
No, we don't.
How come?
Sadly, we don't have that.
How come?
There have been a lot of crackdown targeting of independent media outlets and journalists. They have their licenses revoked. There have been so many, I can't even recount, even including government and the CCM media outlets themselves. Whenever they voice something that is not liked by the authorities, then there will be a statement issued, or the Tanzania Communications Regulatory Authority, TCRA, would revoke their license, or they would be forced to pull down certain communication that they have posted online. So all these acts have been going on for a number of years now, and when they are even increasing as we head towards the elections, it results to a situation where there aren't so many media outlets that would be confident and courageous to do this kind of coverage that we are even having right here, right now. So there isn't.
Wanjiru, when did this suppression begin? I mean, you've been observing the Tanzanian elections for a while. You've observed the previous election. When did this open suppression begin?
I believe that the suppression has always been there. When we started this conversation, I referred to these systematic issues that are there in Tanzania. And one systematic issue is repressive laws. We call it lawfare. For the media, actually, there is no press. I would go as far as to say that there is no press freedom in Tanzania, because there are laws such as the Cybercrimes Act, there are laws such as the Media Services Act, which ensure that the media is so limited, because it feels like it's as easy as a person declaring in public that shut down that media house, or just signing a letter and sending it, and it's done. A good example is the case of Jamii Forums, who recently got a 90-day ban because of the work that they're doing. It shouldn't be, because it's institutionalized, because this suppression and repression is institutionalized in the law. It is so easy to push down on the media. And because of that, you can see they're not even trying, because at what cost? What if your media house is raided, your accounts are shut down? I feel like they've even gotten to a point whereby they're just trying to survive, so they'd rather just lay low so that they keep doing their work or covering the safe issues. So this is institutionalized in the law. The government has no qualms about applying this law. And this is actually one of the areas that reforms are really needed, because the Fifth Estate is the mouthpiece of the people. They're the ones who ensure that the right to information to the people is upheld. Right.
Does this translate to the citizens of Tanzania actually just being okay with it? Can we say that maybe a majority of the population of Tanzania, who are in their tens of millions, don't have really an issue with how the government is running their affairs? It's only a few people who, want to pretend that they're enlightened, they're woke, and so they're loud and vocal.
It speaks to the lack of awareness qua ground. I think I'd say that, because if majority of the Tanzanians truly understood what this means for them and their right to access information, they would speak out against it. So we are grateful for those woke people who are actually calling out these laws. Even in Kenya, Wanjiru would not know that this law, there's a specific law, this clause that is adversely affecting my right to freedom of information, the right to information.
Yep.
But until you get to that point and you break it down for them, that's when they'll know and they'll call out the government. So for now, they're relying on those woke people to keep reiterating that this is wrong, this law should not be in place, up until we get to that level of awareness.
Are you agreeing with that, Baruani, that there's a largely uninformed population in Tanzania that they don't know, and so that's why they do not question or push back?
That is not an easy question, but what I can say is they know what is happening and they have their priorities. They care for certain things, and then for other things, they would let others do. When it comes to issues of democracy, human rights, media freedom, political parties act, they may not engage. They may sympathize when they hear somebody has been targeted, somebody has disappeared, somebody is arrested. They will sympathize. But I think what that calls for all the others, all the progressives, if it's the opposition political parties or the civil society, the media, etc., is that all of them have to make sure that they do understand what is it that the people care for. And all the recent polls and surveys show that what is on top of citizens' priorities are the increasing cost of living, unemployment rates, lack of livelihood opportunities and job opportunities, etc. This is what they care for. Without being too detailed, when the civic space opened, even for a short while after President Samia assumed office and he lifted the ban on political parties to organize political rallies, and opposition political parties started going around the country and talking to people and talking about all these reforms, the electoral law reforms, political parties act. People didn't really care much about that. They only started caring and engaging with the politicians when the politicians were now talking or speaking about issues that really matter to the people. If it's about getting fair prices for their crops, if it's about being able to export their crops or benefiting from artisanal mining, etc., the things that really translate into food on the table, being able to afford housing, being able to afford medical services, schooling, etc. That is what the people care for. And you would see that Tanzanians are pushing back, are engaging with their leaders, whether they are from the ruling party or from the opposition, as long as it's something to do with their livelihoods, employment opportunities, etc. But when it comes to what I can call these abstract concepts of democracy, human rights, transparency, etc., you may see that Tanzanians are disinterested because they don't see the tangibility of that.
Right.
So it's a wake-up call for all of us to show the connections between democracy, human rights defense, and the people's everyday realities.
Right. Actually, I was just going to ask, how, the how then to help people, bridge that gap and see the connection between the two. Is it correct to say anecdotally that CCM enjoys support across Tanzania largely as a party? I'll ask this as a yes or no question to both of you. And then as a follow-up, how then does it enjoy this if it does enjoy this widespread support, how does that happen even with all these issues that, like Baruani has stated, whether it's unemployment, whether it's agriculture, how are they still enjoying this widespread support? Let me start with Wanjiru.
It's hard to answer that as yes or no, because I'd have to see the numbers on the ground to actually say, yes, they do enjoy widespread support across the country. But one of the reasons that we're seeing such big numbers at the campaigns, I believe it's because of the amount of money that is being put into this campaign work. Remember, as Baruani mentioned earlier, that there is some funds that the political parties are given when they vie, if their name is on the ballot box. So they do have access to this money, so they're able to hold these big rallies, and people show up. But does that truly reflect the situation on the ground? The campaigns, the numbers in the campaign rallies show what is on the ground. Tanzania is huge. I don't know if I'm wrong, it should be around 68 million people. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think about 70, 68 to 70.
Yeah, it's huge. Are we using the campaign rallies as a measure of how things will happen at the polls? But I'm not able to speak to the support that CCM has until I see those numbers.
Okay, so then back to Baruani. Yeah, yes, does CCM enjoy widespread support across Tanzania? And then, you said, the abstract issues may not speak to a lot of Tanzanians, but those very tangible issues of unemployment, of agriculture, of the economy and things like that, how come those are not a pain point if CCM does enjoy widespread support?
CCM does enjoy a wide support across the country. It's not as CCM would love to see it. They would love to see that they have a support of over 80%. But from the polls that we at Traweza have been conducting over the years, from 2015, 2018, it shows that the support for CCM has been around the same. It's in the upper 50s and the lower 60s, with the opposition getting up to, it's in the teens. So there is a huge difference between these percentage points in terms of the support that the CCM enjoys versus the opposition. Now, do they connect to the things, the issues that the people care for? For the opposition, to increase their support, it becomes difficult, because if they are less visible, and they are less visible not by choice, but because of all the things we have been talking about here, the oppression, repression, and the limits that they face because of the laws, but also the statement and the actions by state organs, etc. So it really prevents them from becoming more visible. They have improved and become more effective in using social media, and that is why one will see that the opposition has a lot of support from among those who use the social media platforms. But the majority of Tanzanians rely on the TV and the radio and political party, other kind of in-person rallies. And if the opposition cannot afford, is not given the space to be able to go and meet with the people, then they wouldn't be able to garner that support from the people. And the CCM continues to enjoy that support.
So the Republic of Tanzania is going into an election on Wednesday, the 29th. But Tanzania is Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. It brings in together Tanganyika and Zanzibar. So it's taking place in both, right? In Zanzibar and in the mainland, with early voting starting in Zanzibar tomorrow. How's it like in Zanzibar? Is the mood the same, bearing in mind that Samia Suluhu Hassan is originally from Zanzibar? Is then Zanzibar okay and happy going into this election to cast their ballot for their sister? Right.
And when we talk about the semi-autonomy of Zanzibar, does that also mean a difference in the politics of Zanzibar and how it's done? If from the, what would I call it, like a campaign mode perspective, but also even from a human rights perspective, media perspective, is anything different basically from Tanganyika to Zanzibar?
Start with you, Wanjiru.
Okay, start with me. I don't see anything different. Even Zanzibar is on campaign mode. I think maybe because they're not in the mainland, we're not seeing it as much as we do right now on TV stations across Tanzania and in the region. But yes, even Zanzibar is on campaign mode. We're looking forward to monitoring how things go on the ground, with a focus on the violations that might happen in the context of these elections. Same goes for mainland on 29th. But yes, I am again unable to speak if they're going to vote for their sister, as you referred to her, Eric. But we will see how it goes. We do know that they're ready and set for tomorrow. We'll let you know how it goes.
Okay.
Baruani, how is it like there in Zanzibar?
The Zanzibar election, I can say there could be some similarities to your upcoming elections in 2027 in that it's for the first time that they are going into the elections without their equivalent of the late Baba. Yeah. Saif Sharif Hamad passed on in 2021, I think. And he was that figure like Baba in the Kenyan context. And the opposition candidate who has replaced Saif Sharif Hamadi has a different stance. If he is not announced as the winner, is he going to calm the masses? Or is he going to take a different position? And what would that entail post-election, depending on the results? That is what the people are looking forward to see what will be his reaction in case he's not announced. Because he's very different from his predecessor, in that he has said very clearly that he's not going to be diplomatic. He's not going to stand aside and calm the masses.
Okay.
I want to just sample some of the comments coming in. As Jeremy says, in Tanzania, Samia is everything. She's the voter, she's counting the vote, she's a returning officer, she's the Electoral Commission. What does that need for an election? While Maimuna Mwidau says, in Tanzania, it is CCM that rules and decides who will be the next president, and not Samia or those before her. The party is a machinery that controls the grassroots across the nation. Noel Ondera, my observation is that CCM must extricate itself from the government. Imagine you cannot hold any public position if you're not a member of CCM. The current constitution must be ripped apart. As Jeremy again says, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania leaders have formed a WhatsApp group to crush their fierce competitors. Let's start with this one of just confirmation here. Noel Ondera saying that, for you to have any senior position in public service, you must be, somebody who is a member or supporter of CCM. And the strength then of this party CCM, in even the machinery of CCM, in deciding who the candidate and the leadership of the party is. How is that, Baruani?
So, for the non-political positions, it's not official, but it's there as part of the tradition, part of the customs, and it has its roots when CCM was formed, and in the early 1980s, when CCM and President Nyerere then came up with this philosophy or policy, chama kushika hatamu, that is, the party holds the reins of power, the party running the government, the party runs every pillar of the state. So that was an official policy back then. But when we transitioned into multi-party democracy, the chama kushika hatamu policy was supposedly no longer going to be the policy of how we are running the country. But since Magufuli came into power, people have been wondering whether we have returned to a single party state and the chama kushika hatamu policy. In that he was clearly making public statements when he was making these appointments that it's only the political party, the cadres of CCM who are going to be appointed into even non-political positions in government. For instance, the district executive directors, Magufuli even said he would not understand, he would not accept them as the overseers of the elections to announce a candidate from the opposition as the winner while he appointed them. So he made it very clearly and publicly. President Samia hasn't done that, hasn't said it very clearly, but of course just people are observing and they are seeing that all the appointments that have been made, there are some affiliation. But even recently, and I will land here, when CCM was undergoing the party primaries, we saw so many civil servants, senior civil servants, coming out and taking these forms and expressing their interest to be put forward as CCM candidates, either as ward councillors candidates or MP. So we saw all of them even some of them from the private sector, from civil society. So whether people are using that as just an opportunity, a political platform for them to get into power and positions, or if they are strong and serious affiliate to CCM, it remains unclear. But we saw people from the government, from civil society, from the private sector, all of them showing that they hold CCM party membership cards, and they expressed their political interest in that way. And it's from all sectors, all levels across the country.
Right. I want to go into human rights a bit. Tundu Lissu would potentially have been on the ballot had he not been in prison. You said he's been in prison for 205 days on charges of treason, which means no bail, of course. Just speak to us a little bit about Tundu Lissu's role in Chadema, how it came to be that he was arrested for treason, what the accusations exactly are, and what that means, again, for opposition politics in Tanzania. Let me begin with you, Wanjiru.
I mean, in the case of Tundu Lissu, as I mentioned earlier, it's now been around 205 days since he was arbitrarily detained. When he was initially arrested, he was an active part of these calls for no reforms, no elections. He was calling on Tanzanians to boycott the elections because there were no reforms. We expected to see the misuse of the court system. Tundu Lissu has not had access to legal representations, his lawyers, and every single time he's arraigned in court, it's constantly adjourned up until now. I think the latest hearing was on Friday, where despite the court cancelling out all the evidence that had been placed in front of it, we actually expected the court to throw out this case. But the prosecution came and said that one of their witnesses was in upcountry, I believe, and unable to attend the court. So it's now been adjourned to 4th of August, which...
4th of August next year?
Sorry, 4th of...
November.
4th of November, which coincidentally is right after the elections. It's after 28th and 29th. So as Amnesty International, our calls have remained constant across the board. These charges, the one for treason as well as the one for the Cyber Crimes Act, they appear to be clearly politically motivated to keep him out of the running. And we've been calling for his immediate and unconditional release to ensure that he goes back to his family and to go back to the work that he does as Chadema. But I mean, since even the 2020 elections, Tundu Lissu had been at the forefront of Chadema as a chairperson. He's been very vocal in regards to calling out the violations against human rights that the government is perpetuating in different ways. So in 2020, it was, I won't call it a more dire situation. He still faced this level of repression. He was even shot, I believe it was 20 times, and he's been recuperating, and he's back. He was ready to be back in this ballot and to be part of the reform that Tanzania needs. But now we're seeing the court justice system is being misused against him. That is why he's now in jail. He's still in jail this long.
Right. I have so many questions still following up to that. One is on the strength of the judiciary, but I'll park that, the judiciary in Tanzania, and just begin with this kind of coordination that's happening within the East African communities, but it's a very negative coordination. I don't know what the other word to use is, as kind of a repression of human rights, where you see human rights defenders from one country in the East African community go to another and end up being either abducted, assaulted, and or both. Just speak to that in the context of Tundu Lissu's hearing that some human rights defenders from here tried to attend, and then the continuing pattern.
I believe there was a tweet you read about it, Eric, where someone said there's a WhatsApp group that East African leaders are in. The official name, or what we are calling it, is transnational repression. It means that as much as human rights are being violated within each country's borders, we are now crossing the borders. Like anything can happen anywhere, and which is such an escalation in the violations that are ongoing. In the case of Tundu Lissu, East African activists and civil society organizations have been doing a lot around regional solidarity to stand with each other, because working in silos is clearly not working right now. If our leaders are coming together to violate our rights across their borders, it's about time that we also come together to stand in solidarity with each other. So one of the ways that East African activists and CSOs have been doing this is by observing trials in other countries. So in Uganda, we have the ongoing case of Kizza Besigye, who has been in detention since November last year, I believe. And even in his case, we constantly go observe his trial. We go with adjourn to another day. But specifically in the case of Tundu Lissu, I'll highlight what happened in May this year, where there was a group of activists from Kenya and Uganda who did cross the border to go stand in solidarity with Tundu Lissu. At the airport, I believe the stories started when quite a number of them were turned back. So we have Martha Karua, Gloria Kimani, William Tunga. They were stopped at the airport. But for those who were able to get into the country, they were able to go. They wanted to go and to observe this trial. I believe they were stopped at the gates. And sadly, in as all this was happening, we had two activists, one from Kenya, Boniface Mwangi, and Agatha Tuhaire from Uganda, who were arrested. They were interrogated. There was the sexual assault, there was the torture, and then eventually they were dumped at the borders of the two countries. So in Boniface Mwangi's case, he was dumped at the border of Tanzania and Kenya, and in Agatha's case at the border of Uganda and Tanzania. This repression shows that even President Samia Suluhu's government has zero disregard for being held accountable, even by people outside of this border, outside of their borders. It's important that we keep in mind that once this starts, it's hard for it to stop. At this point, there is no human rights in East Africa, because anyone can come forward. It can be you, it can be me. But now what it means is that we also have to work together as the three countries in terms of activism to ensure that we hold each other accountable. So in the case of Agatha Tuhaire and Boniface Mwangi, there is a case that has been lodged at the East Africa Court of Justice. I mean, we all fall under the East Africa community, so we are calling for accountability and for investigations into what happened, specifically calling on the government of Tanzania to ensure that all the people involved are held accountable in free and fair trials. Will it work? That's yet to be seen, but we keep campaigning and we hope for change.
So something that you have to push for. And then now also brings that into focus the regional bodies. And I want to come to you, Baruani. You have these regional bodies. And there's a question here from Janet Sankale, who says, the silence of regional bodies like the EAC, the SADC, the African Union in the face of what's going on in Tanzania is shocking. It's clear that the elections have been choreographed, and 29th is just an exercise that appears more like a coronation for President Samia than a democratic contest. These institutions were established to uphold democracy and good governance, yet despite clear signs of repression, they have issued no statements of concern. They have instead deployed election observers. What then are these observers meant to assess? If these regional bodies are deploying election observers with a clear view of what's been happening in TZ, and now we even have the East Africa community is headquartered in Tanzania, what's the role of these regional bodies, Baruani?
I would say that these regional bodies have lost their relevance over the years, not just in the case of Tanzania, but everywhere across Africa. What happened in Eastern DRC, what is happening in Northern Mozambique, and what has happened in other countries as well. And we do not see these regional bodies stepping in. So not just during elections, but even when there are serious cases of human rights violations, etc., we do not see them stepping in and helping in the situation. And in the same way that these regional bodies are losing their relevance and their legitimacy, we are seeing even the UN questioning itself as the UN is trying to reimagine itself this year, observing UN plus 80, and wondering if it remains relevant and legitimate in the eyes of the people, if it's really helping the people. Some data by Ipsos, I think, and Afrobarometer have shown that there is an increased mistrust on established institutions, not just national institutions, including political parties, ruling and opposition political parties across Africa and around the world, but even other established institutions like the regional bodies as well, in that they have lost their relevance. They exist for reasons only known to them, but not really to help the nations, to help the people in those countries. So with these regional observers, what do they do in an election like the one that is happening in Tanzania in 2 days? Perhaps it's just to document and bear witness. That in itself is a good thing, at least for the records, to just document what happens. Will they be able to go public with whatever the findings are? We doubt that from previous elections, because we didn't see them going public with some of those findings. They came up with statements like, we did not see evidence of voting fraud. Those kind of statements.
Right.
Not say that, okay, these were fraudulent elections, but they would say we did not come across evidence of blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, maybe they're just bearing witness and documenting, and maybe that information will become useful in the future. But currently, their legitimacy is really questionable.
Ooh, it's hard to take. No, but it's a conversation we've also had here around the legitimacy, the toothlessness of international bodies, and then how to strengthen them. I would now pose that question to us, not how to strengthen international bodies, but how to strengthen democracy from within, such that we don't need this like big bully standing over us or some oversight to act right and to uphold the principles of our Kenyan constitution, for example, and then call for better governance across the East African community. What does that look like, Wanjiru? When we're thinking through where these elections look like they're already decided, right? How do we move forward from there to somewhat strengthen democracy in Tanzania?
I think it goes down to the people claiming their rights. We've mentioned that, as Baruani has said, we don't expect much from these regional bodies. And as much as we'll appreciate the documentation, because it goes a long way in ensuring calls for justice and accountability are heard after the elections, after the fact. But it means that I believe it's only the citizenry that can strengthen democracy at this point in time. How does this look like? This looks like increased civic participation across the board. It looks like them claiming their rights, stepping up and saying that these are fundamentals that I'm entitled to as a Tanzania, and I must hold the people in power accountable, because after all, for the most part, I put them there, and I'm putting this in quotes because of the current. Yes, but the people need to step up and claim their rights. Until we get to that point, I believe as Juniper that this status quo will continue.
Do we have, in all these kind of movements and agitations, it requires strong and committed leadership. All right, so we have Tundu Lissu. Tundu Lissu has been shot many times. Came, recuperated in Kenya, lived abroad for a while in exile, came back to Tanzania hoping that the Samia Suluhu administration would actually, because they had extended an olive branch, they would live by that. He is incarcerated. Do we have other Tundu Lissus in Tanzania? Do we have others who would, keep this fire burning and be a motivation for the ordinary citizen to actually join this call?
Given the current state and the closed civic space in Tanzania, we have a report that we launched last week on Monday called Unopposed, Unchecked, Unjust, a wave of terror sweeps across Tanzania ahead of the October 2025 elections. And in this briefing, we documented so many cases of enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrests, illegal detentions, unlawful killings, torture, and very severe restrictions to the freedom of assembly, association, and expression. That is the current situation in Tanzania right now. Anyone who is dissenting is under attack. Right. You are very quickly arrested and detained without any reason. And no one is safe. I mean, even TikTokers, content creators are currently in detention for maybe speaking out about the state of things, the state of human rights in Tanzania, or calling out issues like corruption. That is the situation offline, qua ground. I don't think that situation allows any person who is loud, who is an activist, to rise up and speak out, because the restrictions and the repression is so severe. So as much as that is a sad situation on the ground, what we're now seeing is online activism is vibrant. It's something to behold, honestly, in terms of Tanzania. Yes, in country we have restrictions on platforms like X, Clubhouse, Telegram, Facebook when required. For example, if someone wants to speak out against the government, Facebook is conveniently shut down during that press conference. We are even seeing in some, most Tanzanians, those who want to be active online have to use VPNs, which are illegal in Tanzania. You know, like the space, everything, the government has put the situation it's so tight that you have to go above and beyond. But we are seeing quite a number of people online stepping up. A good example is, I'm sure you know about Maria Sarungi with the Change Tanzania project. So online, the conversation is vibrant. People have to jump through hoops to get there, but clearly the passion is there. Yeah, the passion
I'm
is there.
asking that because, this country has gone through that. If you think about that push for the second liberation of this country, there were the Nyayo torture chambers, there was Nyati House. People were being picked up, university students being picked up, being incarcerated, long periods of time, detention without trial, tortured. But there are still many. You arrest these ones, there are others who crop up elsewhere.
It's like Medusa, you chop one head, another come out.
Others come out, you know? So it was just a movement that went on for years, but you could see that there were, if you look back, you'd see there were very many people who were playing a role. Those that were in country, those that were even went into exile, and they were pushing from outside, supporting those that are inside. I'm asking whether there's such kind of a movement that has been building or has been there over the last 15 years.
I would say there is.
Yes, Baruani.
If I can chip in.
Yes,
I would say there is. There have been cases, for instance, recently there were the Kariakor traders who, because of a new decision by the government, I think it was some kind of a regulation, on warehousing charges or something like that, I don't remember exactly the specifics, they decided to have some kind of a silent protest by not opening up their businesses for a number of days. And the government is threatened. The government wanted to have a conversation, quote unquote, with their leaders. But then the traders felt like their leaders were compromised, and they refused to agree to what the government wanted, until when the government had to go to them and talk to them in ways that made sense to them, and they reopened their businesses. There were cases of boda riders, then do this in your Kenyan context, who refused to some requirements by the government, and then the government had to push back. And most recently, commuters using the Dar Rapid Transit bus system, dissatisfied, very unhappy with the congested bus system, the Dar Rapid bus system. They started demonstrations, they started these protests, demanding for more buses, demanding for better services. They were chanting and recording, and the government had to intervene. Initially, there were threats by the police and other law enforcement units, but when they realized that the people are not backing down, then the government had to intervene, and they increased the number of buses, and now the services are better. And that's what the commuters wanted from one part of Dar es Salaam known as Kimara. So there are these pockets of resistance, people pushing back. Maybe they are somehow similar to the leaderless, tribeless movement in Kenya, but we are seeing them. So individuals like Tundu Lissu, Maria Sarungi, and others may be targeted, yes, but when you have dissatisfied, very unhappy people organizing, mobilizing on their own, in ways that it's not easy to understand those kind of movements, perhaps, as Wanjiru says, the pushback, the resistance is going to come from the citizenry. This is what we should be expecting moving forward, because leaders can easily be targeted. But these mass movements have no clear leaders, then they can organize and mobilize.
Very briefly, in like 30 seconds, Baruani, how do we strengthen and bolster that? Because like you said, it's pockets here and there. How do we strengthen and bolster that, especially in the absence of whether it's legislation, a constitution, political goodwill? How do we strengthen that? And then, of course, across the East African community as well, how do we hold each other accountable to some standards of democracy and basically a respect for human rights?
I am not going to pretend to be an expert on how to to bolster those kind of movements. I think those kind of movements are usually organic. As an analyst, all I can say is as people continue to suffer, and if the authorities do not learn that there's a limit to pushing people, and that to get to a point where they'll start pushing back, then they will fail. No matter how they try to control the people, people are going to push back. How that will come out, how that will be manifested, I don't know. I really don't know.
Fair. Thank you so much. Wanjiru, in 30 seconds.
There's a question that we were discussing prior to this before I go to that, but as a campaigner, there's one group of people that I actually want to laud that I've seen have been very instrumental in keeping this conversation going. These are Tanzanians in the diaspora. They may have left Tanzania because they were gone to exile or on their own free will. But even once they've left Tanzania, I'm seeing that it's quite a vibrant group of people that is pushing this conversation. Yes, most of them are outside East Africa because clearly at this point, East Africa is not a safe space. But online, it's very surprising, and I love how they keep this conversation going and ensuring that just everyone is aware of what is happening in Tanzania. How we can strengthen this movement, I believe we can do it by keeping this conversation going. Humans are very forgetful by nature. I don't know what shiny news topic will come up tomorrow and we'll forget about this deepening human rights crisis in Tanzania. But one way we can keep this conversation going is by constantly talking about it. Challenge to you, Eric, to just ensure that even after the elections end, these conversations about human rights do not stop. Don't move on to the next topic. So it's important to keep the conversation going and keeping it in the limelight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Wanjiru, and thank you so much, Baruani. We have been discussing Tanzania Decides in 2025. Tanzania is holding general elections this Wednesday, the 29th of October. We'll be, of course, keeping you updated on anything that comes up, anything of interest, of course, to the Tanzanian people, and that's everything that happens there, and to the East African community as well. Hashtag is Fixing the Nation NTV. We have to sign out, but Your World is coming up next. Leo tunaongea juu ya emotional unavailability. Are men allowed to feel? The culture of suppressing male emotions and its cost. Okay. Winnie and Mwekali will be discussing that. Are men allowed to feel? That's one hell of a question, Eric. Are you allowed to feel?
Yes.
Okay.
Baruani, are you?
Baruani? Oh, he's left. It's okay.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, yes. Are you allowed to feel?
Nowadays, yes. But growing up, we were not allowed to feel.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hashtag is Fixing the Nation NTV. We'll be back tomorrow, 6 to 10 a.m.